The folder landed on the dining table with a sound that Petra still remembered months later. Not a slam, not a crash, just a flat, deliberate thud that somehow said everything. Petra Winslow Crane, 36 years old, director of the Winslow Community Housing Initiative, stood on the other side of that table and looked at her husband. 14 years of marriage. 14 years of Saturday breakfasts and disagreements about the thermostat, and one miscarriage they never fully talked through. And now this. Boyd Crane, 41, Chief Operating Officer of Crane Alderton Development Group, standing in the kitchen of the house she had helped him buy, pointing at a folder like it was evidence of something. "Explain that," he said. She didn't reach for it right away. She looked at his face first, the way she always did when something felt wrong, searching for the version of Boyd she had married. He was still handsome in the way that photographs are handsome, symmetrical, composed. He had always known how to arrange himself. She pulled the folder toward her and opened it. Inside were 3 wire transfer records, each one showing a transfer from the Winslow Initiative's operational account to a shell entity called Grayfield Consulting LLC. $48,000, then $62,000, then $91,000, $201,000 total. All signed, according to the documents, by Petra Winslow Crane. She looked at her signature on the bottom of each page. Her name, her handwriting, or something that looked very much like it. She closed the folder. "Boyd," she said quietly, "I didn't sign these." He didn't blink. "The board's forensic review flagged them last week. Your signature appears on all 3 authorization forms. The transfers went out over 8 months. I'm telling you I didn't sign them." He sat down slowly, the way people do when they want to look tired rather than cruel. "Petra, the partners have already been notified. We had no choice. This is $200,000 from a non-profit that then some families. If this comes out publicly, Boyd, it will destroy everything we've built. Boyd." Her voice was flat now, flat like that folder landing on the table. "Where did you get these documents?" He looked at her for a moment, then away. "The compliance audit." "Which compliance firm?" A pause. "Alderton's team ran it." Alderton, as in Garrison Alderton, Boyd's business partner for the past 4 years, as in the man who had been at their house 3 weeks ago for dinner, sitting at this very table, laughing at a joke Petra had made about airport security lines. She had refilled his wine glass herself. She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened them and picked up the folder. "Going to need copies of everything," she said. "Every transfer record, every authorization form, every timestamp in the audit log." Boyd looked at her like she had said something strange. "Petra, I think you should talk to a lawyer before." "I am talking to a lawyer. First thing tomorrow." She tucked the folder under her arm. "And, Boyd, you should have come to me first, before the partners, before Alderton's team. You should have come to me." He didn't answer. And in the silence that followed, Petra understood something she hadn't wanted to understand for a long time. She walked upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and called her sister. The Winslow Initiative had been Petra's project from the beginning, which is to say it had been her family's legacy and her personal obsession for the better part of a decade. Her grandfather, Roland Winslow, had built affordable housing developments across the Mid-Atlantic for 40 years. When he died, he left behind a foundation and a directive. The money was to be used for low-income housing support, permanently, not to be dissolved or redirected. Petra had taken over as director at 29, 6 years before any of this happened, and she had run it with the kind of careful attention that came from understanding exactly what was at stake. The families who came to the initiative were not abstractions. They were Donna, 32, a home care aide, trying to get her kids out of a mold-damaged apartment. They were Kenneth, 58, who had worked 30 years in warehouse logistics and couldn't make rent after his back gave out. Petra knew their names. She attended their move-in days. She remembered their children's ages. She had never, in 6 years, moved a single dollar without proper authorization, dual signatures, and board approval, which meant someone had been very careful and very patient in learning how to make it look like she had. Her lawyer, a quiet man named Clifton, who had handled estate work for the Winslow family for years, met with her the following morning. She spread the documents across his conference table and walked him through everything she knew. The authorization forms had her signature, but the timestamps on the digital metadata were wrong. 2 of the 3 forms showed a creation date that fell on a Tuesday in March. A Tuesday when Petra had been in Richmond for a site visit, a fact she could prove with hotel records, a signed contractor meeting log, and 3 hours of email correspondence. "Someone created these forms while you were out of town," Clifton said. "Yes, and ran them through a signature duplication or had access to a blank signed document. Boyd's assistant handles my outgoing correspondence when I'm traveling. She has my signature on file for standard authorization forms." Clifton looked up. Boyd's assistant, Leanne Alderton, Petra said. Garrison Alderton's daughter. The room was quiet for a moment. How long has she been Boyd's assistant? Clifton asked. About 8 months, Petra said, which is exactly how long the transfers were running. Clifton set down his pen. He looked at Petra with the particular expression of a man who has practiced remaining calm through the delivery of bad news. Petra, he said, I want to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Is there anything else? Any other account? Any other document? Any other connection between Boyd and the Alderton family that you haven't looked at yet? She had not slept the night before. She had sat in the guest room with her grandfather's old account ledgers and the initiative's financial statements going back 5 years, cross-referencing every line. What she found was not what she expected to find. It was worse. The initiative had a secondary endowment account, a restricted fund Petra's grandfather had established separately, designated specifically for land acquisition. The fund held just over $4 million. It had always been considered untouchable, legally ring-fenced by the terms of Roland Winslow's trust, except that someone had filed an amendment to the trust deed 8 months ago quietly through a probate court filing in a county 3 hours away. The amendment restructured the fund's governance to include a co-trustee. The co-trustee was Boyd Crane. She had not known. She had not known because the filing had been routed through a secondary legal address she hadn't used in years, an old correspondence address from before she updated the initiative's registered information. Someone had known that address, someone with access to the initiative's old paperwork, someone like Boyd. Petra sat in Clifton's conference room and looked at the co-trustee amendment and felt something she could not name precisely. Not anger, not grief, but something that existed in the space between them. She thought about the miscarriage. She thought about how Boyd had been at a conference in Phoenix when it happened, and how he had flown home the next morning, and how he had held her hand in the hospital, and how she had believed, completely and without question, that she was the most important thing to him. She thought about how belief works, how it requires almost no evidence once it gets going. He planned this, she said. Not a question. The structure suggests it, Clifton said carefully. He needed access to the endowment. He couldn't access it while I controlled the trust, so he needed to either remove me or add himself. He chose both. Clifton nodded slowly. The falsified transfers serve 2 purposes. They discredit you with the board, possibly enough for removal for cause, and they create a paper trail suggesting financial mismanagement under your watch, which could be used to argue the trust requires outside oversight, with Boyd as the outside overseer. That appears to be the intent, yes. She folded her hands on the table. What does Garrison Alderton get out of it? Clifton opened a second folder he had prepared overnight. Crane Alderton Development Group has submitted a bid on a 40-acre parcel in Henrico County. The parcel is currently owned by a land preservation trust that's been holding it for affordable housing development. He paused. The Winslow Initiative has right of first refusal on that parcel. Your grandfather secured it in 1991. Petra went very still. If you are removed for cause, Clifton continued, and Boyd becomes co-trustee, the right of first refusal can be waived. Crane Alderton acquires the land at market bid. The estimated development value is somewhere between $60 and $80 million. She looked out the window. There was a woman on the sidewalk below pushing a stroller, talking on the phone, the ordinary afternoon continuing in complete indifference to what was being said in this room. $60 million, Petra said, at minimum. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, pull every financial statement the initiative has filed in the past 6 years, every board resolution, every trustee communication. I want to see every single document that has Boyd's name on it, or Garrison Alderton's name, or Leanne Alderton's name. She picked up her bag. And Clifton, I need you to find out who notarized the trust amendment. It took 11 days. 11 days of late nights and early mornings and phone calls Petra made from the car so Boyd wouldn't hear. He was still in the house, moving around it with a careful politeness that she now understood was performance. He asked her how she was feeling. He made coffee. He left articles on the kitchen counter about stress management. She read them, thanked him, and went back to her files. The notary on the trust amendment was a woman named Suzette, who worked out of a commercial mail center in a strip mall 40 minutes from their house. Clifton sent a clerk to interview her. Suzette remembered the filing clearly, not because anything had seemed unusual, but because the man who brought it in had been, in her word, memorable. Tall, in a good suit, very sure of himself. He had signed as the requesting party. His name on the notarization form was Boyd Ellison Crane. Clifton filed for an emergency injunction to freeze the Winslow Initiative's accounts and halt any trustee action pending investigation. The injunction was granted within 48 hours on the basis of conflicting trust documents and disputed authority. The board of the initiative received a formal legal notice the same afternoon. Boyd came home that evening and found Petra sitting at the dining room table, the same chair, with a cup of coffee and no expression in particular. "The board called me," he said. He was standing in the doorway. His jacket was still on. "I know, Petra. The notarized trust amendment has your signature," she said. "The transfers were created on dates I was documented to be out of state. Leanne Alderton had access to my signature authorization files. And Crane Alderton has a pending bid on the Henrico parcel that requires waiving the initiative's right of first refusal." She watched him work through it, watched him calculate. "You knew about the parcel," she said. "I knew there was a right of first refusal issue. Yes. You knew that removing me was the only way to clear that right. Petra, did you ever love me?" She asked it the way she asked most things now, quietly, without dramatics, because she genuinely wanted to know. Or was the timing convenient? He looked at her for a long time, and then slowly he sat down across from her, which told her more than any answer he might have given. "It wasn't like that at first," he said. She nodded. She picked up her coffee. "When did you meet Soren?" He looked up sharply. "Soren Alderton," she said, "Garrison's son, your co-investor in the Henrico project, according to the LLC filing I found last week." She set the cup down. "I'm guessing around the time you hired Lan." Boyd said nothing. "There's one more thing," Petra said. She reached into the folder beside her and slid a document across the table. "My grandfather's original trust deed, the full version, not the summary I was given when I took over the initiative." He looked at it without touching it. "Section 12, she said. "In the event that any trustee or co-trustee is found to have engaged in fraudulent conduct affecting the trust, their appointment is automatically voided and the trust reverts to primary Winslow family control." She paused. "I called the estate attorney who drafted it. He confirmed it's enforceable." Boyd's face did something complicated. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was closer to the expression of a man who has run a very long race and just understood he has been going in the wrong direction the entire time. "The injunction covers the Henrico bid," Petra said. "Crane Alderton loses the purchase window at the end of the month. The parcel goes back to the Preservation Trust." She stood up. "I'll be filing for divorce Monday morning. Clifton has the paperwork ready." She carried her coffee to the sink, rinsed the cup, set it in the drying rack. A small, ordinary gesture of a person who still lived in this house, for now, and intended to leave it exactly as she found it. The board met 3 weeks later. There were 11 members, most of whom had known Petra since she was a child attending the initiative's annual fundraisers with her. Grandfather perched on a folding chair beside him while he talked to city council members about zoning regulations. They had watched her grow up. Some of them had doubted her, briefly, in those 11 days, and she understood that. Doubt was rational when faced with documents. It was what you did with the doubt that mattered. She presented everything: the metadata on the falsified forms, the travel records, the notary statement, the Henrico bid documents, the LLC filing with Soren Alderton's name. The trust amendment Boyd had filed without her knowledge, without board notification, without any of the procedural requirements the trust deed required. She presented it without anger. That was the part people commented on afterward. How calm she was. One board member, a woman named Odette, who had worked in housing advocacy for 30 years, said later that it was the calmest she had ever seen someone dismantle a betrayal. The board voted unanimously to ratify Petra's authority, void Boyd's co-trustee status, and refer the matter to Attorney General's office. They also, on Odette's motion, voted to accelerate the Winslow Initiative's acquisition of the Henrico parcel, 40 acres. Land Roland Winslow had fought for over 30 years ago, knowing that someday someone would need it. His granddaughter's name was already on the right of first refusal. It had been there the whole time. The divorce took 8 months. Boyd did not contest the financial terms, which Clifton said was either conscience or strategy. It didn't matter which, because the outcome was the same. Garrison Alderton's firm lost 3 municipal contracts in the 18 months that followed, the details of which became public through the Attorney General's investigation. Leanne Alderton resigned her position. Soren Alderton's name disappeared from the LLC, filing after the Henrico bid collapsed. None of that was Petra's doing exactly. She had not gone looking for consequences. She had gone looking for the truth, and the consequences had followed the truth, which is the way it is supposed to work, even when it so rarely does. She moved into a smaller place that fall, a townhouse near the initiative's main office, which meant she could walk to work on good weather days. She kept the dining room table. She didn't know why exactly. Maybe because it was hers first. Maybe because she had sat at it long enough that it had become, in some way, a record of what she had survived. On the day the Henrico groundbreaking happened, she stood at the edge of the cleared land with a hard hat and a cup of bad construction site coffee and watched the crew drive the first stakes into the ground. It was November, cold and clear, the sky, the particular blue that only happens in the fall. She thought about her grandfather, who had stood on other cleared lots on other cold mornings, and understood that the point of building something that lasts is not that you will be there to see it finished. The point is that someone will. She drove back to the office, hung up her coat, and went to work.